Rambo: The Force of Freedom was a cartoon that didn't pull any punches in regard to weaponry and almost recreational violence. Naturally, the accompanying toy line from Coleco followed the same path, and the result was a series of military figures second to none. In fact, they were so awesome, they were ridiculous.
We gotta get back to the past, to the 20th century. Digging through the bubble wrap into your memories. Back was the collector, he's protecting what we find. Relentless heavy rhythms keep us safe through time. Retro blasting.
This is not a toy.
Just the corners of your mind. Retro blasting. The stuff you love since you were 9. We're blasting into the past to see what thrills still last. Retro blasting.
Rambo, the Force of Freedom.
In 1985, Coleco released Sectars. The toy line didn't last long, but the 6-inch tall figures they designed became the basis for their Rambo: The Force of Freedom figures in 1986. That's the first thing that jumps out at me about these toys, the scale. It's clear Coleco had no interest in competing with G.I. Joe on their level. Rather than make Rambo compatible in the 3 3/4 inch scale, the toy makers made the figures almost double in height. This series aspired to tower over G.I. Joe, and while their ambitions didn't pay off, Coleco made a very nice figure set. They made sure all of the characters were represented. In addition to Rambo and Troutman, you had Turbo, Cat, General Warhawk, Gripper, Havoc, Mad Dog, White and Black Dragon, Nomad, and even the later characters like Snakebite, Chief, and Touchdown Jones. I can't help but notice the attempted detail in the faces. It's impressive. Rambo and Troutman are not modeled after their cartoon likenesses. Coleco all but lifted their faces right off the movies. Rambo's a little fugly, but it's obvious they did their best. Colonel Troutman is the runaway hit of this figure line. Richard Crenna got one of the best action figures an actor could wish for, and this was long before companies like Sideshow produced super detailed likenesses. The figures' heads were made from that rubbery, squishy material used on the Masters of the Universe and A-Team figures. As a result, it seems a number of the figures have either a small head or a large head, depending on the factory they came from. Can you believe how goofy the Rambo figure's head looks?
Yeah, all bloated and out of proportion. If I were Stallone, I'd be ticked.
2 versions of the same figure? Major fail for Coleco. Hey guys. The Rambo figures did suffer a lack of articulation. Every figure had arms bent at the elbows at 90-degree angles to tuck their weapons into their biceps, with no elbow joint to adjust it. They also had terrible hip movement on an internal ball joint system similar to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, making it dicey to try and seat them in vehicles, resulting in a lot of busted hip joints. This malady plagued Sectars as well, and was not resolved for Rambo. Each Rambo figure came with a trading card style file card, which was nice because you didn't have to scissor cut them off the card backs like G.I. Joe's, even if they were a little too small. The line had a great fleet of vehicles and smaller battle packs. The jet and helicopter were a little flimsy, but the Defender 6x6 absolved all sins. It was the must-have ride in the line. Tough as nails, brimming with weaponry, and accurate to the cartoon with a portable rocket launcher. But what sets the Rambo figures apart from every other toy line in the 1980s are the accessories. The sheer number of them. Each figure came with a laundry basket full of guns, ordnance, and gear. Bullet bandoliers, knives, pistols, utility belts, rifles, radios, machetes, binoculars, swords, whips. It's insane. Gripper alone comes with 5 Uzis. Each figure has sheaths and holsters for their smaller weapons. Many come with multiple rifles. Colonel Troutman is loaded down with gear, as are the ninjas. And unlike most other toy lines, you didn't have to worry with Coleco's Rambo if you lost a weapon. The philosophy behind this toy line would make any survivalist proud. When in doubt, add more guns! Take the centerpiece of the line, the Savage Strike headquarters. Not only does it look like a bamboo watchtower from a Vietnamese POW camp in a missing in action movie, complete with the locking cell and the leech pit underneath, but the base has 2 watchtower guns, 2 tripod-mounted ground-level weapons, and crates of additional machine guns. On top of that, Coleco released numerous weapons packs, so you could replace any lost weapons or accessories fairly easily. The best part about this is that most of them are still sealed, and you can get them on eBay fairly cheap. Some of the figures, like Rambo, Cat, Warhawk, Havoc, and Black Dragon, came with spring-loaded weapons on tethered strings, so you could, for example, launch a rocket from Rambo's famous RPG without it going down a toddler's throat and choking them. Not really sure how useful Warhawk's blade-firing sword would be in a real combat situation, but whatever. Where Coleco overdid it were the motorized backpacks. You have to remember that in the 1980s, parents were really annoyed by a lot of toy lines utilizing batteries. And so you had toy lines like Star Wars that had lights and sounds, and parents would always get the toys home, and then they'd forget to put the batteries in there, or they hadn't bought batteries, and it was an extra expense. Star Wars vehicles had lights and sounds. He-Man vehicles were motorized, and parents always hated it. Hasbro famously designed 99% of their G.I. Joe vehicles to not require batteries. Coleco, on the other hand, wanted kids to have gizmos, but they also wanted to stay away from the batteries discord. So they went with an innovative idea to use wind-up motors in these action feature backpacks. What resulted were clunky, superfluous accessories that were difficult to attach to the figures, and they just made everything weird. Take Turbo's salon-haired dryer missile RoboCop helmet thingy. How about Nomad's somewhat obscene chest cannon? Because that wouldn't completely get in the way while in combat. Or White Dragon's flip-out ninja sword, because if I were a ninja, I'd want my sword permanently attached to a robotic backpack. The pinnacle of this backpack ridiculousness is Gripper's wraparound Uzi shield, a stack attack of 4 Uzis behind a small shield that does nothing to protect the wearer. It just so happened that the next year, Coleco released a toy line called Starcom. It was a science fiction toy line that utilized a lot of these wind-up motorized features in their spaceships. I can't help but think that Coleco tacked on these backpacks to the Rambo line as kind of a testing ground for this technology. While G.I. Joe lives on as legend, Rambo's figure series has fallen into obscurity, a truly niche toy line for the true 1980s enthusiast, much like everything else Coleco made. But in truth, the Rambo toys are really cool. They look great on display and are rather easy to find. Some of the later ones are quite rare, including a few that were only released in South America. It's also important to know that the 2 ninjas are in high demand because, well, everyone loves ninjas. But when it comes to the core characters, you can put together a set without a huge investment. Granted, most of the figures you do find are incomplete, but if you have the patience and you can track down the accessories and complete them, you'll have an awesome addition to your toy collection. But tracking down those lost weapons, that will be your worst nightmare.
We'll rule the world, General Warhawk. We need Rambo! Rambo, the force of freedom.
Here's a present, Havoc. Wow! Rambo, behind you! Warhawk! Rambo, my sword. Look out! You again!
Rambo, the force of freedom.
Get Rambo and General Warhawk with their battle action weapons, each sold separately.